Welcome back. I'm Brett Bennett.
And I'm Kyler Goulding.
And this is the Drumline Takeover.
Hey Brett, did you know that drums have been around since 6000 BC?
No, I did not, but I do know that they're a very important piece of most cultures, such as African and Cuban. Drums were even used as a form of long-distance communication.
Wow, that's really cool, but do you know what's awesome?
What?
This week's It with Mandy and Toby.
They were singing, my, it's Indian interview time, where we interview some Indians and have a good time. So sit back and watch this interview time, 'cause it's Indian interview time, Indian interview time.
Welcome back, I'm Mandy Goulding.
And I'm Toby Hayes.
This is Indian interview time. Since you have experience playing both snare drum and bass drum, which one do you prefer to play?
I prefer snare drum because even though bass drum is fun, bass drum takes a lot more coordination. It can be really complicated. And, as you know, you play bass one, which is what I played. You have to be, it's because we're both small. That's one thing. Secondly, you have to lead most of the splits and stuff, which can be tough. But with snare, you don't really have to rely on anyone else. Granted, if someone else messes up, you can keep going. But with bass, it's a lot easier to mess up if someone else, let's say bass 3 were to mess up his part.
Kincaid?
Yes. That throws
try
that
working
can
with
throw
Kincaid.
that's not easy. That can throw the whole split off and it can mess up the part and y'all can get lost.
It does, every time.
But with us, it's a lot easier to isolate ourselves in our parts.
Since you have been playing snare drum for almost a year now, what do you prefer, traditional or match grip?
I think I prefer traditional grip. It's just, it can be a bit tougher to get down the match grip. Match grip is simple because your hands are, it's the one we learned to start off with.
What season do you prefer, indoor season or marching season?
I prefer indoor season because, with marching season, it's a hot season. It's really hot.
Sweaty.
It's sweaty. It's a lot more repetitive than indoor. And the mindset of doing one set over and over and over and over. Whereas with...
Because other people can't get it right.
Exactly. Whereas with indoor, it's just us. It's not worrying about those other people. And if there are the other people, it's just front ensemble. They're not marching.
Peace out, Girl Scouts. This has been individual.
You know what I wish next year's show was?
Tonto Land?
Heck yeah, and he's here to talk about it in this week's Masterpiece Theater.
Masterpiece Theater presents Tonto Talks Tonto Land, where Tonto talks about Tonto Land. Here's Tonto.
What's up, guys? My name is Josiah. They call me Tonto. I'm here to tell y'all about the best marching show in Alvarado history. It's called Tonto Land. So the origin of Tonto Land, it takes us way back to the 6th grade. And I met a guy. His name was John Rendham, a.k.a. they call him the God. So in 6th grade, I joined percussion, and funny story, I was thinking about switching to French horn because all my friends were playing French horn, and luckily I didn't. But we'll skip a few years. My freshman year, I made the drum line, and I played snare drum, and that's where it all began. That's where I got my nickname Tonto. So a long story short about that, there was 2 Josiahs, and one of them was my buddy Josiah Richmond, and of course I'm the other one. And they thought that I looked like an Indian. I don't look like an Indian. But they thought from the Lone Ranger, they thought I looked like the Tonto guy. I don't know who that is. I've never seen the movie. And they thought that they started calling him Kimosabi for a while, which is kind of funny. But my nickname stuck. And so that's how the nickname got. My sophomore year, we had a marching show called Heartland. It was a really good marching show. And so later on in that year, me and Patrick Dietz, our band director, we had a talk, and we decided that it would be for the best to, go ahead and change the show to Heartland to Tonto Land. And so how that came about was it would be a 24.5-minute quad solo. Yes, a 24.5-minute quad solo. So the first 10 minutes would be the first movement, and that it's funny because original marching shows have, an opener, a ballad, and a closer. Well, my marching show starts with a ballad, and it is everybody dancing around me, and all I'm doing is tapping on the quad, which is I'm going to show you here in a minute. So that's how the first movement goes, and it's a pretty nice opener. But it's our ballad, so it's kind of weird. Our ballad is our opener, and so for our second one is where the real playing starts, and that one is 5 minutes long. And so what I'll be doing, I'll be showing you what I will be doing then, and everybody will just be marching lines in a snake around the football field around me, and I will be on a riser playing by myself because I am the best in the band. Okay. So for the closer, it's a very complicated rhythms and just a whole bunch of stuff. So what I'll be doing is a 14.5-minute solo of me dancing, not playing, dancing. And this choreography is one that you've never seen before. It is stick choreography. And I'm not going to show you what it is because you will have to see next year in the fall of 2021, Tonto Land.
That was Tonto Talks Tonto Land. Come back next time when Tonto talks more about Tonto Land.
What do you think's better, snare drum or bass drum?
Well, I've only really played snare drum, so I can't really voice my point about that.
Well, Kincaid and Gavin are here to figure out what the popular vote is in this week's AWOC.
I'm Gavin Rios.
And I'm Kincaid Brown.
And this week we asked people if they prefer snare drum
or bass drum.
Do you prefer snare drum or bass drum?
Snare drum.
Important question, sir. Snare drum or bass drum?
Snare. Snare drum or bass drum?
Snare.
Sir, important question. Snare drum or bass drum?
Bass 2.
Snare drum or bass drum?
Bass drum. Important question, sir. Snare drum or bass drum?
Bass drum all day.
Snare drum or bass drum?
Snare, obviously.
Got an important question. Snare drum or bass drum?
Honestly, snare.
Snare drum or bass drum?
Bass, because, I'm all about that bass.
Snare drum or bass drum?
Bass drum.
Well, I'm a snare drum player, so I would prefer snare drum.
Yeah, but I'm a bass drum player, so I prefer bass drum.
But you can have the snare solo.
But bass drum keeps the downbeats in the band.
Well, if you can't keep in time in the band, then you're just a bad band.
Not always. I mean,
well, in my opinion,
you have to have something to guide the band.
Well, it shouldn't matter because snare drum is just more pizzazz.
At our last indoor competition, we placed second overall.
Well, it's time in which we highlight the skilled,
The funny,
the silly,
and the talented.
It's time for this week's shenanigans. Hey Kyler, do you want to pedal alongside you in your drumming adventures?
Why not?
Well, here's some in this week's POW.
Here are some pets you can adopt at the Alvarado Animal Shelter.
In honor of National Poetry Month, Miss Crumpton, the librarian here at AHS, coordinated with two ninth grade English teachers, Miss Smith and Coach Morris, to put together an event called the Two Snaps Cafe, which took place on April 7th and 8th of this week. Throughout the 2 days, Miss Smith and Coach Morris's classes met in the library to read and learn about poetry through a presentation given by Miss Crumpton, where she talked to students about the different types of poetry, the artistry behind it, what sets it apart from other forms of literature, and resources on where to find poetry on the internet and social media platforms like TikTok and Instagram. Students were also given time to explore poetry independently through books laid out on the tables.
I created Two Snaps Cafe to celebrate National Poetry Month. I know that sometimes we're not really familiar with poetry at this age or as freshmen, and so I wanted to make sure that the two freshman classes, Coach Morris and Miss Smith's class, got the opportunity to just sit down in a quiet space and be exposed to different poetry and a different kind of atmosphere.
The inspiration behind the approach of the Two Snaps Cafe came from poetry clubs that can be found in metropolitan cities such as New York. Jazz music, dim lights, electric candles, and a quiet atmosphere was mimicked in order to recreate a version of a poetry club at the high school.
Our children are getting the opportunity to go spend time in the library with Miss Crumpton, participating in the Two Snaps Cafe, where they will have the opportunity to listen to some jazz music, have some snacks and hot cocoa, and be given the opportunity to dive deeper into some poems and styles of poetry that we only got to skim the surface level of in class. The goal of this activity is to get kids to actually try to fall in love with poetry because it is something that we use every single day without even realizing it.
Along with learning about poetry, students were also provided with hot chocolate, sodas, and popcorn to accompany the relaxed ambiance that was set.
My favorite part about this whole poem situation is the fact that she took the time out of her day to explain to us what poem meant, because I really didn't understand it before she had explained it.
The Two Snaps Cafe has not only brought justice to upholding the legacy of National Poetry Month, but it has rightfully earned a spot in the annual events that take place at the AHS Library. I'm Sophia Diaz, Golden Report News.
That's all for this week. Thank you all for watching.
And we'll see you next time.
Action.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Cole Gardner. We're back at it again with the Drumline. Today we're going to be doing some stuff like we always do. Today we're going to, got this thing here called the Vibes. Got a nice shirt on, you know how it is. Achievement. We got some music here. This isn't mine. I'm going to look at it real quick. Hold on.
Oh yeah.
There we go. See, look, take a look at that. Lucas, I don't know who that is. Anyway. That's about all I gotta say, but keep it a stack.
Thank you, sir, for your kind words of advice.
Scope.
Bass drum.
No.
Alright. Snare drum or bass drum?
Quads.